Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the kind invitation to come speak to you. I'm not going to speak about the perspective of the ADA, but rather speak about our assessment of the FDA. We work together with the FDA very, very closely. We attend all of their endocrine metabolic advisory committee meetings, and we speak at those meetings on behalf of patients with diabetes, talking about unmet needs and directions that we really need to go. Now, the FDA does have a division specifically addressing devices. So we do have that uniform, nationwide repository of information and review in that regard. Now, the FDA, like many Americans, has a somewhat overblown view of themselves. So as you can see, this is straight from their website. They're protecting and promoting your health. But I must say, over the last 6 months, they've actually been working very hard and doing some very good things. So in October, they had a public workshop on collaborative approaches for medical device and healthcare cybersecurity. Now, they're a bit verbose, so when you describe it, this is one sentence. All you really need are the last 2 lines to identify the cybersecurity challenges and ways the sector can work together to address these challenges. That was the goal of the October workshop. They moved relatively quickly in this regard, so that in fact, on January 23rd of this year, the FDA permitted marketing of the first system of mobile medical apps for CGM, data sharing across Bluetooth. So now we've got the workshop to really work on cybersecurity of all of these electronic systems and the first application of that with an approval of a CGM with real-time communication via an Apple mobile device. In addition, they moved on in November for another workshop looking at software in diabetes management, getting to some of the points that have been addressed in the previous 2 presentations. Again, they're just a tad verbose, but really all they're really looking at here is device interoperability. Now, ultimately, they wanted to get to insulin bolus calculators, but the bottom line is that interoperability is absolutely critical. And you actually heard a bit of that in the last presentation. So, what is it that the FDA does that's a little bit different than what occurs in the EU? We do have a breakdown according to risk, from low risk to high risk to those that in fact can be wavered. And you can see what the FDA does is to try and achieve a certain degree of balance. When those devices are very high risk, like the artificial pancreas, their pre-market approval is absolutely required, and they are very attentive to every aspect of it. You'll hear more about the artificial pancreas tomorrow. With the retrospective CGM, they're less concerned because nothing is happening immediately. And then the moderate risk, they pay more attention to, but it is less life-threatening. Now, the interoperability issue is absolutely critical because we have a variety of devices providing a variety of data in a variety of different formats. And in fact, now we're beginning to see all of these devices coming together. And ultimately, that coming together leads us to the artificial pancreas. But all of these different systems work in their own codified manner with a great degree of secrecy that is intellectual property. And now when we begin to talk about sharing that data from patient to family member or patient to healthcare provider, and we start getting into remote uploads, it's a whole nother story that needs to be dealt with. So, wouldn't it be nice if all of these devices, all of the pumps, all of the meters, all of the CGM, gave us a view that was uniform, that allowed us to look at data in the same way? Unfortunately, they don't. And so if you go to a very sophisticated diabetologist's office, they will have a drawer full of connectors and data download systems, and maybe it actually gets done. The bottom line is, if you can't access it, if you can't view it, it doesn't get used. And unfortunately, that's all too common. And the reality is, if you don't have access to the data, you have no choice. And it serves no value. We have been pushing devices for a very long time. And they've actually had a significant impact on our level of care. But when you look at the type 1 diabetes exchange, 25,000 patients with type 1 diabetes in the United States, what you find is that only 3% upload their pump data once a week. Blood glucose monitoring from their meter, only 2% do it once a week. And CGM, the most sophisticated monitoring, only 6% do it once a week. And the vast majority never do it at all, because we need to learn how to use the information. And part of that really is an ecosystem problem. So pulmonary disease is rapidly catching up, but diabetes is the only disease that I'm aware of in which the individual with the disorder does their own laboratory monitoring, meeting CLIA and CAP standards, then takes that information and interpolates it to decide what the therapeutic administration ought to be, and then gives a parenteral therapy. Think about that. That's an incredible ecosystem that people with diabetes have to deal with every single day. So the issue of only going to the physician is silly. The recommendations are that a person with diabetes see their healthcare professional 4 times per year. The average visit in the United States is 11 minutes. We're talking about 44 minutes a year for a chronic disease, and instead we expect the individual with diabetes to do it themselves. So what's involved here? Number one, you have to have access. You have to be able to see the data. You need to be able to see the data in a format that is interpretable and actionable. You have to have the materials necessary to make rational, medically reasonable therapeutic changes. And it would be awfully nice if somebody can be looking over your shoulder as you do all of this. And this is really what we're talking about with a patient-managed disease. Now, it gets complicated. You have all of the personal devices, you have all of the aggregators and the managers of this information, you've got all of the different telehealth and e-health systems that are going to be used, and then you get down to the electronic medical record. And at every phase, there are interfaces that need to be dealt with. And these are the issues that the FDA is actively taking on now. So, from the standpoint of remote monitoring, they acknowledge that diabetes care depends on data, but you have to have data access, and that's a challenge. The real-time viewing of that data really depends upon the communication systems, and to have the assistance and the help of experts on the outside. And without the adequate interoperability, this is frankly impossible. because you're looking at different formats, you're looking at different data, and no one has the oversight. And yet, if we can achieve interoperability, just think what we might be able to achieve. So, what we really need is device consolidation. We need collaboration and cooperation among industry so that everything is using the same systems, or at least can be read by other systems, whether they're meters, pumps, CGMs, the whole business. We need to overcome the frustration that the lack of interoperability results in so that we can really move the science forward. So, what is the benefit of interoperability? Everybody's moving in the same direction at the same speed, and everything works together. But it requires cooperation. And the FDA is actually moving in that direction. They've recently recognized a specific communications technology, and I am not expert in this. Please don't ask me any questions about 12IEEE technology. It's the standards that the FDA is moving towards in order to achieve interoperability of all of these different devices to improve care. Now, what does this interoperability ultimately mean for patient care? So if you look at devices in diabetes today, we have several very good companies working, producing their own product and exhibiting the results in their own software, none of which speak to one another. If instead all of them had a standardized data exchange, then we have all of the entrepreneurs in the world developing apps to be able to work with this so that we can begin to learn where things go. And if you have not learned anything about computers in the last 5 years, what you know is it multiplies quickly. So this is what really is going to be moving us forward. So in summary, and this is all straight from the FDA website. I'm more than happy to share all of the slides because none of them are mine. They're all public from the FDA. We're going to have a greater variety of devices and more choices with faster development if they talk to one another. All of this will lead to an enhanced quality of life for the person with diabetes and their caregivers, family members, mothers and fathers of children, and frankly, healthcare providers as well. We need to be able to promote that communications and get all of the stakeholders, all of the industry partners working together in order to allow us better care and better outcomes. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much for a great talk and actually going the next step beyond devices, but how to interpret data coming from devices. So there will be probably a lot of comments or questions.
We're standing between the audience and lunch.
You solved all the questions. But maybe a brief question from my side. So what is the current status of these consolidation or harmonization? Because is it really totally at the beginning, or what do we have to understand with this 12IEEE?
See, I asked no questions about 12IEEE. So the workshop occurred in November of 2014. And so the consolidation is extremely early. The idea is finding the interface and the platform that everything can go through for common reporting and common interaction. And so that's really the intent. The FDA has contracted with at least 2 companies that I'm aware of in order to facilitate all of this, but perhaps our industry partners can actually tell us more about how far along it actually is.
course, if nobody is saying something, but Robert, marvelous, of course, the overview. My question is not about the IEEE, but what is your opinion about the knowledge, the resistance of the healthcare professionals to assist the patients? Because we have really ivory towers, sometimes because their knowledge is worse about the systems, and they, even with the 44 minutes, they cannot fill in such devices. So don't you think that in the education of doctors, and not only doctors, but nurses or assistants are so important for patients, that in that education at the universities already or in schools must be more improved than nowadays? Because also in my experience, also in the Netherlands, you can talk, but primary care is saying, I don't know.
Yeah. So when primary care providers are seeing 60 patients per day, it's hard to expect them to do extra work on the person with diabetes. What I've learned throughout my career as a teacher has been the best way of getting someone to adopt something is show them how it will make their life easier. Right now, the devices that we have do not make a physician's life easier. It makes it harder. And so if we had these integrated systems where all of the devices can be looked at with the same presentation, we can teach healthcare providers how to interpret data in that presentation. We can make their life easier. Until we do that, they will never adopt it.
Please.
Access to data is, of course, the most important point to take care of the patient and adapt the treatments. So interoperability of the system is a major point. I am very happy to know that FDA encouraged the main company to collaborate to invent an interoperability system in the future. Do you really believe that only the company can do such a task? For personality, of course, the answer is no. So in the real world, what do you imagine, in fact?
So the question is, can we realistically expect industry, with their diverse perspectives and their diverse systems, to come up with a uniform presentation? Take a look at your computer and look at set formats for JPEGs, set formats for PDFs. It's been done. It's been done with DVDs. It's been done less successfully with the old Betamax and VHS. Somehow industry can come together and come up with a uniform presentation, and everybody ultimately benefits.
It is true. It's said that it's an external actor who actually set the standards. If you ask industry to come up with a similar standard, not to say it cannot be done, but it is going to be a significant challenge. I think that most probably a third party somewhere.
That's what the FDA is trying to do.
Absolutely.
I completely agree with you. Left to their own devices, I think industry quite reasonably says, our system is the best. Everybody will come to us. That's what Sony said about Betamax. It didn't work out so well.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, welcome to Europe. Because if we have sometimes we wish, obviously I'm on a European basis, that Commission would even lead more and would be in a position to even impose more sometime of standards, but or approach. We have 28 countries. I mean, we used to be less, now we're 28. We might be even more tomorrow, and every time it's an extra challenge that actually comes forward.
I don't know if you've been looking at the U.S. newspapers recently, we have 50 states and they are almost as contentious as the countries in the EU. No, if you ever go to Alabama or Texas, you will realize it's not the same language.
Okay, I think this is a good end of the session. Thank you very much, Dr. Ratner. And